Miami Community News, the Andy Korge Show. Here, as I said, on Miami Community News, the hub for local news and information in South Florida. And thanks for joining us. And we have a great show with you. Our good friend and guest, Miami-Dade County Democratic Party Chairman, Steve Simeonides. Steve, thanks for joining us today at the Andy Korge Show. How are you, sir?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty well.
Have you recuperated from that election, man? I'd never seen anything quite like that. It was such a flurry of campaigning and in a very unusual way. I mean, in light of the pandemic and COVID crisis we're in, I had to get creative during the campaign.
Yeah, we've certainly, we put in a lot of work, but, the team is ready to go and chomping at the bit to, begin registering Democrats again, signing folks up for VBM, and getting out the vote for the numerous elections we have in 2021. So the fun never stops.
Yeah, I bet it doesn't. Let people who are watching today, give them an idea of what a local party or chairman like yourself of a local party, be it Democrat or Republican, what are really what are your goals? What are the things that you're trying to accomplish as a party here in Miami-Dade County?
Certainly. Well, we're always looking to increase voter engagement and voter participation, especially on the Democratic side for us. I think that's something that we, accomplished to a degree this election. We had, more Democrats turn out than ever before, a higher Democratic turnout percentage than ever before. So, we viewed those as wins, but we have very high expectations, and I don't think we met the high expectations that we set for ourselves there. I think we were looking to break the Democratic turnout record even more than we did. We got about 3 out of every 4 Democrats to come out and vote this November, but we want to do better than that. We need to ensure that everybody has bought in to the idea that there are so many things at stake with that vote. We've seen numerous kind of changes already and shifts in tone just in the presidential transition, and here locally as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a whirlwind. It doesn't stop. And you were just, correct me if I'm wrong, reelected for another term. How long is your term as party chairman?
Well, I took over halfway through Juan Cuba's last term, so I'd been chair for 2 years, and I was just reelected to a 4-year term.
Oh, well, it's quite a commitment, and kudos to you for taking that on. Obviously, your political beliefs are something that's probably driving you into this position and a lot of responsibility.
Certainly. I mean, we were very energized and excited to be able to elect the first Democratic mayor that we've had win an election in about 20 years, the first woman mayor that we've ever had. So those are some of the goals of our organization, of a local party. Obviously, our focus is locally, with the top seat being the county mayor, which we were incredibly excited to play a large role in helping Mayor Cava win.
I want to play off of that. And there's been some, and I've heard some criticism of the party as it relates to the attention to specifically just the mayoral race and the presidential race. And down the ticket, down the line, if you look at a lot of the state rep, state Senate seats, the congressional seats, the performance wasn't quite as good. What do you attest to that?
I mean, there were a host of issues, that were experienced, which is why, we suffered some, fairly disastrous losses. I think, our branding and our messaging from the national level on down, was lacking significantly. We were outbranded, we were outmaneuvered on communications, and I think that cost us, fairly significantly in a lot of areas.
Yeah, I agree with you. Specifically, I want to talk about this point, and I've said something that has been somewhat controversial. It's gotten some negative comments to me personally. But I really view the electorate here as being very gullible. And what I mean by that is that, I saw a lot of advertising on TV that pointed at candidates such as Donna Shalala and Debbie Mercosal Powell and Javier Fernandez and Jose Javier Rodriguez, just to name a few, pointing to them as being socialists. And the message, David Custon, who a political consultant here, so much has told me just days after the election on this show that if he had had more money for Steve Bovo and could have started that, Daniela Levine Cava's a socialist message back in early September, that he thinks Steve Bovo might have won that seat and that election. How do we, as a Democratic Party, how is it that we couldn't fight back that messaging? I mean, it just seems ridiculous to me that you can just simply paint someone like Donna Shalala, who by all accounts was an incredible first-term U.S. congressperson, but how you can just paint a broad picture as someone being a socialist and having that stick and having the electorate, especially. And again, I'm probably going to get more nasty calls and emails and texts from people, but especially the Latin, the Hispanic electorate, many of which are from countries like obviously Cuba, Venezuela, countries in Central America that have fled their country because of socialism.
I think a lot of the failed messaging on the Democratic side around socialism dealt with us getting too in the weeds on issues. When we were charged as socialists, we would say, oh, but we're not socialists. We're just in favor of things like expanding access to public education, expanding access to healthcare. Everyone's in favor of Medicare. That could be viewed as a socialist policy. Whereas all the Republicans were doing were just saying that we were socialists without any actual evidence or follow-up statements. It was just a one word, we're socialists or we're radical leftists, and that's it. They didn't care to offer any proof because there was no proof, because it's not true. When in reality, you could flip it on its head very easily, and there's a lot of support to say that Donald Trump and the Republican Party are the party of socialist dictators. Look at Mario Diaz-Balart just this weekend voting to subvert democracy in 5 different swing states, just asking to throw out millions upon millions of votes so that his preferred candidate can win. That's anti-democratic. That's dictatorial. That's what Latin American dictators do. And the Democratic Party failed in the branding with regards to the socialism. We lost that argument. We allowed ourselves to be labeled as something that we were not, without pointing out and successfully pointing out the obvious hypocrisy and projection by the other side.
Yeah, well, looking a good example, I mean, of that, and I think Daniela Levine Cava did an excellent job campaigning, but she was campaigning for 2 years practically, it seemed like. I mean, she was really worked that hard for a long time. But a good example of that was, that defund the police message that you saw constantly out there, and specifically as it pertained to Daniela Levine Cava. But meanwhile, Steve Bovo was the guy that voted several years ago to defund the police.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the hypocrisy. They're counting on being able to trick voters. And a lot of times they've succeeded, just like they did with the whole defund the police. There was no Democrat that called, that said the words, in a meaningful way to defund the police. That's not what Democrats were about. We wanted to wind up reforming our local governments so that police didn't need to deal with mental health calls. I mean, they're not mental health specialists. That's not what they're hired to do. That's not what they were necessarily trained to do. Their job is to promote public safety and help fight crime. Not deal with a schizophrenic man having a breakdown.
Yeah, it's so true. So how is a party let's look forward now. We saw what happened in November in this election 2020. Things will change again because we're going to at some point get out of this COVID situation, this crisis, and maybe life will get back to normal. What it will be the direction of the Democratic Party in Miami-Dade moving forward into 2021 and beyond?
Certainly. I mean, we're going to continue engaging Democratic voters to build on that record turnout. We're going to continue to get involved and stay involved in local elections. We got involved in 10 local elections here, and we wound up, or 10 municipal elections here, and we wound up winning 8 of them. Those are the bench building seats that the Democrats are always talking about building. We helped build that bench to prepare people to run for higher office and to help ensure that Democrats are, we're electing good people at the municipal level, because a lot of the issues that people experience can be solved at a local level.
Is it the place of your organization, Miami-Dade County Democratic Party, and the Republican Party for for that matter as well on their side? Is it your place to go out there and really identify good individuals to run for office, whether that's at the municipal level or the county level, the state level, whatever?
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of our charge. And, in my mind, the Miami-Dade Democratic Party, we are the local party. Our politics, our priorities need to be local. You've got the Florida Democratic Party worried about statewide races. You've got Senate victory and House victory focused on the state Senate and state House races. You've got the Democratic Governors Association focused on the gubernatorial races. D-Trip focused on congressional races. But there is nobody other than the Miami-Dade Democratic Party focused on the county mayor, county commissioners, and municipal races. That's our responsibility, and I'm going to maintain that as a priority for us moving forward.
We read yesterday on this show, I had a longtime politico, I would call him, and publicist Seth Gordon, who's had a distinguished career here in South Florida. And one of the guys that he sort of nurtured up and then was a very big, I would say, consultant or advisor to would have been former City of Miami Mayor Manny Diaz. Mm-hmm. And we talked yesterday about Manny's run for statewide, the party chairmanship in the state of Florida, the Democratic Party. I mean, I think it would be a great thing for the state of Florida. Can you give me any thoughts on how that might affect the Miami-Dade County Democratic Party?
I would expect a significant amount of attention focused on Miami-Dade were the former Miami mayor elected to be chairman of the Florida Democratic Party. I think Miami-Dade needs to be a focus. We have the most Democrats in the entire state down here, right, and the most NPAs in the entire state that need to be focused on and messaged to and shown that the Democrats are the party of democracy, the Democrats are the party of healthcare, and the Democrats are the party of affordable education. That's really what our priorities are. We want to ensure that if you get injured or if you get sick or a family member gets injured and sick, it's not going to bankrupt you. We want to ensure that if you want to go to college, that you can do so and you don't have to take out a loan with an 8% APR to do so. Those are democratic principles. That's what we stand for down here.
Yeah, and very well said in terms of the importance of Miami-Dade and Broward for the Democrat, and Palm Beach probably for that matter, for the Democratic Party, because it's really where most of the Democrats in the state live. We saw in this election that, Joe Biden won by a mere 7 percentage points in Miami-Dade County, and so went the state of Florida for Joe Biden's presidential campaign. So do you feel like the state organization understands that well enough and gives enough resources down here? Do you have a good working relationship with the state organization? Because as you said, I mean, it really does. The state does come and go based on Miami-Dade and probably Broward counties.
I think if we were to elect someone like Manny Diaz to be our state chair, he's someone who's proven that he can win here in Miami. He's someone that's built coalitions. He's someone that's fundraised, exorbitant amounts of money to be able to fund, very large infrastructure and organizational parts. So I think electing him as Florida Democratic Party chair would really give this state a big boost and push us back into making the state blue like it was in 08 and 12.
Yeah, I mean, or was it just an outlier? I mean, at the end of the day, Hillary Clinton won Miami-Dade County by 30%, nearly 30 percentage points. Barack Obama by in the low 20s. I think it was 21, 23%. And then Biden came in and won by a mere 7 points. I mean, do you feel like that was just an outlier? Was that an effect of the socialist message that, Donald Trump and his campaign kept putting out there? They kept painting that picture of Biden, and especially from what I saw, Kamala Harris. I mean, do you think that we can get back to the point where a Democratic candidate for president can get back into the 20s in terms of a differential? And don't they need that in order to win the state?
They do need it in order to win the state. And I do think that we can get back there. I think both of the last two elections were outliers. I think a lot of the success that Hillary Clinton had down here was the substantial investment that her campaign made immediately prior to the election. Between August and November in 2016, there were tens of thousands of Democrats registered every single month. That was an effort that wasn't here, likely because of the pandemic slowed a lot of things down. It prevented us from getting out into big spaces with lots of people and going around and registering voters. Which tells us that we need to be more focused on the individual data, knocking on the right people's doors, and messaging to those people specifically with very specific micro-targeted messages. And those were things I think we could do a lot better moving forward.
So let's talk about moving forward for a second.
Sure.
And I want to pick your brain. Maybe you know something we don't. We can break it right here at Miami Community News on the Andy Korge Show. But what about anybody like you're hearing, anybody in the hopper for that gubernatorial race in 2 years, correct? In 2022. Also, the senatorial seat of Marco Rubio, that's up in 2022 as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. I've heard, I heard of a lot of interest around the state. I've had conversations with a number of folks around the state, including some local folks right here, like Senator Jason Pizzo. I know that I think he would be a great fit for the Democratic nominee, and a very good chance to be able to knock off Ron DeSantis if he were to enter the field. But obviously the Democratic Party, their role in primaries is a very removed one. We also have a great current statewide commissioner in Nikki Fried, and a lot of other fantastic candidates are going to wind up entering the fray for that gubernatorial race. So the local party and the state party needs to stay out of those races and let the voters wind up deciding. Our job in those races is to ensure that we build up the Democratic infrastructure so that whoever winds up stepping into those races has the ability to just step in once they win that primary in August and then run the table towards November. So we need to be less focused on who is going to wind up running, and ensure that the people decide that and give that person, that victor, our nominee, the support necessary to beat DeSantis. I think oftentimes for those big seats, we're often too focused on candidate recruitment. There's going to be a lot of amazing candidates running for those seats. And we need to let the voters decide who the best person is going to be to face Ron DeSantis.
I want to get you. I'm going to give you my sort of opinion, and I want to see if you agree with it. But it seemed to me that Ron DeSantis, who I like to call Ron DeSatan, by the way, Ron DeSantis,
I always prefer DeSantis.
It seemed to me that at the beginning, he really had built a sort of a coalition. He did some very simple things that were contrary to what Rick Scott did as governor, that got a lot of people in the middle over to his side. And then the pandemic hit. And I see a lot of people disgruntled with the way he's handled it in many ways. Other people aren't disgruntled with it. But I've seen some people that, kind of jumped on his ship, now jump back off several months into the pandemic. And I'm wondering, do you think he is especially vulnerable in a reelection?
I don't think you can ever discount the Republican Party's ability to message disinformation. So while I think, when Rick Scott was in office for his first term, he was the least popular governor in the entire United States of America, and still wound up by the slimmest of margins being reelected.
Right.
So there is no set of data that I think you can accurately predict what's going to wind up happening in 2022. The best that the Democratic Party can do right now is to highlight his consistent failures, not just on COVID, but on numerous other things, like our unemployment crisis, and ensure that the public is well aware of those failures while promoting and building that democratic infrastructure. So whoever our nominee is going into that gubernatorial election can wind up having a very, very good chance at knocking him off.
You mentioned the unemployment system, and I want to talk about that just for a second. And you may not know much about this, but I've talked to people who tried to file for unemployment, and it's a disaster in the state of Florida. And many people say that it was created that way purposefully by Governor Scott initially to keep the numbers down, to show unemployment being very low in the state of Florida. Do you have any comment on that?
I mean, absolutely. They spent $100 million on a faulty website, which is absolutely crazy. Could you imagine if we had provided unemployed people with that $100 million instead of giving it to a vendor of the state to build a failed product? When do we get our money back?
Yeah, never. That never happens, by the way. As you know, that never happens. We get our money back. But
could you imagine pretending and telling people that you're a fiscal conservative while spending $100 million on a website and having that website not even work? It's crazy.
Yeah. And these are some of the topics that whoever that person is that runs, for governor in 2022. I mean, these are the details that people really need to know about. But what scares me or what concerns me about our country and our electorate in general is, and we get back to that whole painting the socialist banner on people. But what concerns me about the electorate is the sheer fact that little details never seem to get heard. And it's always the broad strokes that seem to resonate with people. Do you feel that's the case?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we saw that. I think we mentioned that earlier in the show that bite-sized messaging is always going to be more successful than Elizabeth Warren's position papers. I found them amazing, but how many people in our electorate have the time to be able to go through those? If you're not in politics, if your job isn't in politics, you're not reading all of Senator Warren's position papers, as amazing as they were.
Yeah, but your comment was very simple. Maybe you should run for office. Your comment was very simple, and that was, we spent $100 million on a website that didn't work. We could have put that hands in the unemployed people in the state of Florida during the pandemic. Wouldn't that have been better bang for our buck for those $100 million?
Much. I would like to see that $100 million go to the people instead of to a vendor.
Well, yeah, and especially right now, in the midst of the pandemic. But again, that type of comment you just made is what the people on the far right point at, because they say, well, look, they just want to give handouts to individuals. But this is a very unique situation we're in.
First of all, it's not handouts. The Republican Party constantly talks about tax breaks. That's giving people that's making people pay less taxes. Well, having people pay taxes and then give them some of that money back is the same thing nearly. So it's not handouts. It's investing and giving you money that when people need it, like right now in a pandemic where we have record number of unemployed people. It's not those unemployed people's fault that our government has been completely inept at handling this virus, and much to the difference of many other countries. The state of Florida is roughly the size of the country of Taiwan, which is actually where my parents live. The country of Taiwan had 6 deaths. Are we over 15,000 at this point? It's just been, the response has been not just political malpractice, but it's getting to the point where it's manslaughter.
Yeah, no, it's about 20,000 at this point. So it's bad. It's real bad. And I mean, it's a tough thing to do. Obviously, I've talked to a lot of politicians on my radio show and here, and it's uncharted waters that these guys were in. So I can feel for a lot of them. And it's certainly a balancing act, because you got to balance public health with economic prosperity and mental health as well. So I understand all of that. What I could never understand from the beginning of this pandemic were the simple things that you just got to tell people they have to sacrifice. My parents lived through, my father fought in World War II, and they sacrificed during World War II. They did certain things that they maybe didn't want to do back then, but it was part of a greater good and a sacrifice. And I don't see that necessarily existing in the U.S. I mean, as simple as just wearing a mask, right?
I was just about to make that point. We're not asking people to storm the beaches. We're just asking you to wear a mask and social distance. It stops the spread. That's how other countries were able to keep it contained. Democrats don't want a lockdown. We're not pushing for a lockdown. The other side was the side that locked down our county, that locked down our state. We want just people to be able to go out and spend money at businesses safely. And in order to do that, all you need to do is wear a mask, and wear it properly over your nose and mouth.
Yeah, I mean, simple stuff, right? So, what do you envision? There's 2 other topics. I know we got about 10 minutes left. 2 other topics I want to sort of discuss with you. One is President Biden, and I know that the mood was, and a lot of people that I spoke to that voted Biden said, well, I wasn't so enthralled with Biden. I wasn't excited about him as president, but I really didn't want Donald Trump in the White House any longer. I was exhausted with Donald Trump. I heard that often. Okay. And I look at it differently. I think the Biden presidency is going to way exceed people's expectations. What is your sense in terms of the Biden Harris presidency, and what do you think some of the key things that they're going to try to accomplish in their 4 years in that administration?
Well, I'm very excited for a Biden presidency, and even more excited that the next president of the United States will not be Donald Trump. I think we're starting to see it with some of the appointments. I'm extremely excited that a very high-profile individual was given the Secretary of Transportation cabinet position. I think Mayor Pete is going to wind up bringing a lot of attention to a much-needed department. You want to talk about creating jobs, being environmentally friendly, and making America a better place to live in. We need to completely overhaul our public transportation system. There's other countries that are decades ahead of us. You talk about Japan. You can buy a $20 ticket and make it from one end of their country to the other on high-speed rail. And we are so far behind on things like public transportation. I'm really excited that it got a high-profile individual at the top. And I'm people say that if people are saying it might not be exciting, they're probably not excited about some of the more wonky things like Infrastructure Week. I want that to actually happen. I want us to reinvest in our infrastructure in a time where there are so many unemployed people. We have so much failing infrastructure throughout the entire country. Let's put those people back to work and help rebuild our failed infrastructure.
Yeah, what happened to our high-speed rail here in Florida? Oh, that's right. Rick Scott refused that money from Barack Obama.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah, it's.
You know how many Floridians that would have put to work? You know how much traffic and decongestion off our roads that would have taken off? It would have been huge for our state. But much like expanding Medicare, the Republican administration just refuses to follow common sense solutions that will help people.
Yeah, well, I can answer the question when you ask why. It's called politics, unfortunately, but that seemed to be the reason for that. The last thing I want to discuss with you, and it's been
vote Democrat. We put people over politics.
That's one way to do it. I want to talk about one other subject with you, which has been chronicled all over the country, maybe all over the world, and it was a state Senate seat here in South Florida, occupied by Jose Javier Rodriguez in his race against Ileana Garcia, and I mean, it really stinks. It stunk when it happened. It's the smell's just getting worse and worse. I mean, I don't know what the final vote tally was, but I know Jose Javier lost by, 30, 40 votes, something like that, in a race where this, ghost organization, these ghost donations into this super PAC occurred that stoked a lot of money into the Garcia campaign and into specifically this ghost candidate whose last name just happened to be Rodriguez, who lived in Boca Raton. What's your feeling on all this? How do we avoid it? Just leaves a bad taste in the electorate's mouth, I believe. I'm fine. My candidate loses fair and square. I'm good with that, but this shenanigans I don't like. And I know a lot of people in our community don't like it at all. Give me your take on all of that.
This is just another example of the Republican Party looking to subvert the will of the voters. They knew, Frank Artilles claimed credit for it. He knew exactly what he was doing when they put another Rodriguez in the race. They knew that they only needed to pull a very small fraction of votes. They pulled over 6,000 votes in a race that was decided by 32. So they absolutely put forth a straw candidate with the intention of fooling voters.
But isn't that a common thing? I mean, don't the Democrats do that as well?
I've never seen the Democrats do that. I've seen the Republican Party do that several times. They did it in Senate District 39 as well. They ran a non-black person, but sent mailers with his name and a generic black person on it to black households in Senate District 39.
Really?
They are some of the Republican political operatives that were behind that are the lowest of the low, and it's just an embarrassment that they were permitted to do something like this.
Yeah, well, it's the kind of thing that we don't want in politics. I mean, there were some great candidates again, to go back just for a second as we close here, there were some great candidates that somehow lost traction because they were painted as a socialist. I know Javier Fernandez is going to be here in our studio later today for a program with Bob Powers, and he's one candidate. As an example, I've known Javier for some time now, and I've never seen a socialist flag at his home or talked about how we can bring communism to South Florida. I mean, he's a Cuban American that escaped communism in Cuba, and somehow he got painted as a socialist by his competitor. So, I mean, these
when you say painted at, I don't necessarily think that's the correct word. He was lied about. They lied to the electorate. They lied to the voters, just like they did, with regards to Joe Biden being a socialist. I don't know what Steve Bovo's campaign person was thinking when he said that they would have done better had they painted, our current mayor as a socialist earlier. That's all they did, and it's so far from the truth. All of their attacks on her lacked substance. They were merely fear-mongering, and that's exactly what they did up and down the ballot, because they know if they stick to the facts, they will lose. That's exactly why they look to suppress votes, because they know if everybody votes, they will lose. That's exactly why they want to keep as much money involved in politics, because they know that if they don't have the money to trick people, they will lose.
Yeah, I mean it's very true. They paint this picture, and that's all that a certain section of the electorate hear. And again, it and I'll stick by my comment, a gullible electorate, especially the Hispanic population in Miami-Dade County. They're gullible to that sort of rhetoric.
Yeah, I don't think the electorate is to blame here. You look to the candidates to be able to provide you with truthful statements. The fault here lies with the Republican Party and their consultants, that took advantage of voters that don't have the time to do an immense amount of research. With minimum wage being what it's at, at $8.50 an hour, a lot of people need to work 2 jobs, then take care of their families and eke out some sort of personal time for themselves. They don't need to be, fact checking every single thing that candidates for office say. It's on those consultants that are liars. It's on the candidates that are liars. It's not on the electorate.
So you just mentioned the $8.50 an hour minimum wage. So I assume the Democratic Party was very happy to see. I don't remember I think it was Amendment 2 or 3 regarding the escalation of the minimum wage up to $15 an hour.
Yes, I mean, there's no greater example of how Republican lies and succeeded and Democratic branding failed than on the $15 an hour minimum wage. That passed by a 3-1 margin in Miami-Dade. Raising minimum wage to $15 an hour is one of the most progressive policies that there is in the Democratic Party, to the point where really only one wing of the Democratic Party has been supporting that message for the last 4 years. And even sort of what I'm saying is even the more moderate wing of the Democratic Party hadn't been ferociously promoting that up until very recently. And that won by a 3-1 margin. Democratic policies have extremely, extremely good favorability numbers because they are the right things to do. We want to provide people with an affordable education, and we want to provide people with affordable health care. Those are messages that everybody can buy into. But like I said, we failed at the branding and the messaging aspect of them.
Well, there's always next time, my friend. I see you're in the festive holiday spirit with that Christmas tree behind you. I'm just wondering why my beard is so white and yours is so dark. Maybe that has something to do with age, you think?
Give me another election cycle and I'll be right there with you.
Okay. All right. Well, Steve Simeonides, Miami-Dade County Chairman of the Democratic Party, thank you so much for joining us here at Miami Community News during the Andy Korge Show. We always love having you in. Next time, you got to be next to me over here. And just to play off what you said, Frank Artilles, if you see this or listening, I'd love for you to come in and explain to me about that election, Jose Javier Rodriguez versus Ileana Garcia. Maybe he could brag here live at Miami Community News about how he influenced it. We'll see how that turns out. But thank you, Steve Simeonides, for joining us here this morning. You have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. You too.
Thank you. And thank you, Miami Community News viewers. people hear the Andy Korge Show, what we try to do is bring you information that is specific to Miami-Dade, because you know what? Miami Community News is the hub for local, and I do mean local, Grant Miller's listening, local news and information for Miami-Dade County. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Have a great day.